Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Downs Committee. Particular welcome to anyone watching us remotely on YouTube. We had hoped that today we would be able to meet in person and have you all in the room with us. Sadly, it wasn't to be, and we find ourselves meeting remotely once again. But at risk of making myself a hostage to fortune, we do very much hope that this will be our last remote meeting, and next time we will be able to see everybody in person. And particularly a warm welcome to members of the committee who are joining us as new members of this committee for the first time. Good to see everybody. Just to note, the agenda was published last week. There have been a couple of additions to the agenda. Items 14 and 15 have been added simply because they arose after the agenda was published, and I'll pick those up at the appropriate moments as we go through the agenda rather than leave them at the end. Item 2 is apologies for absence. I've had apologies from Councillor Hume. I'm not aware of any others. Oliver, are there any other?
Sorry, can I just ask whether, sorry to interrupt, Chair, sorry, I'm just getting a duplication. So is anyone else getting two audios coming through, or is that just me? Okay, just me. All right, thanks.
Just you, sorry. Okay, are you aware of any other apologies other than Councillor Hume?
No, just Councillor Hume. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so we can note that. Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Does any members have any interest to declare? Councillor Gollop.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, in view of the interest of connections with members of the Downs Committee, I need to declare that I am a business consultant to Jonathan Baker and have been for some time. And I want members, both of council and from the merchants, to be aware of that connection. I also ought to disclose that I am a member of the Friends of the Downs and Avon Gorge and have been for some time, and also a supporter of Respect the Downs.
Thank you, Councillor Gollop. Councillor Denyer.
Yes, it's not a financial interest, but the last time I was at the Downs Committee, it was making a proposal for a playground on the Downs, so I have that non-pecuniary interest.
Thank you very much. I can't see any other hands. I think everyone is on my screen, but if I've missed anyone, then please shout. No. Okay. Item 5 on the agenda then is the action tracker, which is published online. There is only the one action on there, which is just a watching brief on the A4018 project to come back to us in due course. I think, wearing my hat as a local councillor, I can safely say that's not going to be for a little while yet. So I think we'll just leave that on the tracker to be aware of, keep that on our radar, and come back to that as and when things change. So item 6 is matters arising from the events and finance subgroup. So the notes of the events and finance meeting in recent weeks have been published and online with the papers from this meeting. I'm going to go to Gillian as chair of that group, just to see, Gillian, is there anything from that meeting that you want to pull out and raise, particularly for discussion today?
I think the meeting kind of pointed up the need for some kind of strategic framework going forward in order to help decision making, which is the discussion you and I have had. Clearly, we've got to look towards mitigating the loss of the zoo car parking income. And also, I'd just like to mention that under item 3 and 4, it talks about the track, and essentially this is a piece of track that would go by the water tower. It would be underneath the grass. The word roadway appears rather worryingly in the minutes, and it's not a roadway at all. I mean, John James can add more to that, but it's essentially some webbing that would go underneath the grass.
Thank you, John. Did you want to come in?
Yeah, just as actually sort of suggested, it is a track. It's a track to actually sort of facilitate actually sort of vehicles going in for events. So ultimately, what it is there for is to actually protect the surface of the actual sort of downs.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Just opening that item to the floor. Did anyone have any comment, question, anything to raise on the notes that have been published from the Events and Finance Group? Can't see any hands up. At that point then, I'm going to skip to item 15, which is one of the late items that's come onto the agenda since it was first published last week, which is a proposal regarding the fees charged for the Downs Football League. Jonathan, I'm going to come to you on that, please.
It's customary that we set the Downs and University football charges at this meeting, having previously agreed with the Downs, which didn't, the financing committee meeting, which did not happen due to it not being aware of the problem. It's just recommended that the current rates and conditions remain as they were for 2020.
Thank you very much. Do I have anybody wishing to comment, ask any questions on that proposal that we hold the fees for football at the same rate as they were 2020? I'm not seeing any hands, in which case can I take it, I think just by a general nodding of heads, that that proposal is agreed to. I'm not seeing any dissent there. Thank you very much indeed. That's agreed. Good, that brings us to item 7, which is public forum. We have received 3 statements which have been published. They are available on the website and have been circulated to all committee members. Oliver, I think I'm right in saying that we don't have anybody joining the meeting to speak to any of those statements?
That's correct, Chair.
That's correct. Okay, in which case those statements are all noted and we thank those who've submitted them. Now I'm going to skip again to one of the late items on the agenda, item 14, which is headed Terms of Reference. And what this is a proposal asking the committee to agree to the Terms of Reference for a piece of work reviewing the strategy and the operations of this committee and how it relates to Bristol City Council, to the merchant venturers and the other parties that we work together with. I just want to note that this did come late onto the agenda, and please accept my apologies for that. The reason for it coming late was simply that we needed to have various meetings with council officers to ensure that the support and resources necessary to carry out this review were there, and I'm pleased to say they are. We've had excellent support from council officers in supporting us to go on and do this work. Unfortunately, we couldn't get those meetings into people's diaries until late last week, which is why this Terms of Reference hasn't been published with the papers until Friday afternoon. So please accept my apologies for that. It's not ideal, but I didn't want to wait till the next Downs Committee meeting to bring this to you and to kick off this work. So the Terms of Reference have been circulated. I hope most people have had the opportunity to see them. I know I've spoken to some people in advance already outside the meeting about them. What they propose is that over the next period, up to a year potentially, but I would hope we'll be able to do it in less time than that, we carry out a review of, firstly, the strategy for this committee, what it is we want to achieve on the Downs over the next few years. And Gillian's already mentioned some of that in talking about events and finance, and also getting into the nuts and bolts of how the committee works, how we interact with various parts of the council in terms of finance, operations, scheme and delegation, and all of those kind of areas. So at this stage, we're simply asking for the committee's approval to those Terms of Reference to go on and do that work. And we will also be looking for members of the committee to put themselves forward for working groups to be part of doing that as well, in order to bring a review back to the committee in due course. So I'm seeing a couple of hands going up, so I shall stop talking. Now, Paula and Carla, sorry, I didn't see who put your hand up first, but Paula, can I perhaps come to you?
Okay, thank you. I've seen you've been kind enough to sort of share a draft, so ideas of what might happen in the governance thing, and I think that that's a good starting point. I also think, however, that we do need a review of the litigation case, and I have written to you and to Gillian previously asking for that, and I would like to see if we could get an agreement today that there would be a full report brought back to the committee about the management of the litigation.
Yes, indeed. I've spoken to legal officers within the council, as has Gillian, in fact, asking for that report to be brought back. And we're just in the process of arranging a date for that to happen, but we have asked for a report back, which officers have agreed to provide. It will almost certainly need to be to a closed session of committee, because it will refer to legally privileged advice that the council's been given, which unfortunately we wouldn't be able to publish in any meaningful way, but it will come back to the committee for review and for discussion.
Okay, I spoke to Tim about this, and he said that he agreed that the idea of a report would be a good idea, and in that conversation I did say that the citizens need to know about how these things have been managed, and again, if it's a closed session, I'm not so sure how effectively that would come about, unless that there can be, we could have a closed session but then some sort of summative report. Would that be?
I have no concern with doing that, but we need to take legal advice on exactly what can be published. What I don't want to do is sit here now and commit to being able to publish things which are legally privileged and which are going to get me into hot water for committing to publish what I should. So
I mean, I understand how we would need a closed session to review, to hear the report, I suppose. Well, let's park that for the moment and see how we go with it. But it's good that there's going to be a report brought back to the committee. Do you have any idea of what the timelines for that?
We're aiming to do it over the summer. I think, and I'm looking at you in the same conversation, I think we said early August, I think, to try and get a report back. It's just a question of trying to organise that, appreciating diaries in August are not always easy.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you. Carla.
Thank you. First, I'll just say quickly that I agree with Paula and would like to see that be as open as it can be, legal requirements notwithstanding. On the governance review, I think it looks broadly great and exactly what is needed. Just one question, which is in the process section of your proposal, the public engagement on strategy and public engagement work bit. I just wondered if you had thoughts on how much of a kind of straightforward consultation that would be versus a more participative exercise, because I feel like certain organisations, especially like FODAG and Downs for People, may want to have a more kind of participative process.
Yes. So there are a couple of options, and I haven't yet had this conversation with the council's PR department or the council publication department who support this work. So if any of those officers are listening to this and throwing their hands up in horror at what I'm about to say, then I apologise. But I think there are a couple of ways that this could go, and potentially the answer is that we do both. One is that we have draft documents which we publish and simply open for comments in the way that a normal consultation works. The other is exactly as you said, a meeting or meetings of some description which are open to all of those Downs interest groups and user groups. And yeah, personally, I would very much like to be able to sit with all of those groups in a room with the people who've worked on those documents and have an open discussion. Because a lot of the purpose of those, it's not the only thing that we're looking at, but one of the big things we're looking at is how we do involve other people outside of this room in the management of the Downs. And I think it would make a lot of sense to be able to sit and talk with them about that. So, is that okay, Carla? Yeah, great, thank you. And Councillor Gollop.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It was really only just talking about how we include and engage other people. So obviously right that we talk with other groups that exist. The classic problem we have is how we talk with those who aren't part of groups, but those regular users of the Downs and the residents of our wards neighbouring the Downs who consider it something that they want to share in and would have views about. So I would just ask that we do look at maximising the opportunity. If we turn it the right way, it could be a real opportunity to get local residents to feel they have a role in the Downs, they have a chance to express how it's run and express an opinion. So I just hope we grab the opportunity to bring in those residents who have actually been appreciating it over the last 18 months and give them a chance.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. I entirely agree. Where we are with this at the moment is there isn't a detailed plan for that engagement element, but we do have the commitment of the relevant council departments to support it. And I share your hope that it can be as open as we can make it. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up. Again, I'm going to ask for a general indication of whether the committee supports that terms of reference and is happy for that work to go ahead over the coming months.
I'd just say I'd be happy to be in the working group as well if you needed it.
Took the words out of my mouth, Paula. Thank you very much. The next sentence I was going to say is, if members of the fleet who are interested in being part of that work, please make yourself known to Oliver over the next, let's say by the end of this week, please, if we can. I know I've spoken to some people I've just happened to have seen, so I know we've already got representation from merchant venturer colleagues, so particularly councillor colleagues. It would be great to have that involvement, so we've got a good balanced group between us. Thank you very much. So item 8 on our agenda is the Downs Management Report. So Ben, over to you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Welcome to the new members of the committee. Going back to what the Lord Mayor was commenting on earlier, it would have been a nice day to have a bus tour around the Downs today to show new members the various aspects of Downs life. Hopefully we can do that in the future. In the meantime, feel free to communicate with me with any questions or insight into Downs life as it currently is that you may wish to hear. Firstly, it's nice to be able to start a report that does not mention either a lockdown or associated restrictions for the first time, I believe, since January 2020. So here we are at high summer on the Downs, and the daily focus, as ever, is very much on litter removal and removing from site the many tons of rubbish that have been left behind by the many people enjoying our wonderful green space at the moment. The costs associated with this process, the drain on the team's ability to be getting on with anything else at times, plus the growing sense of disillusionment that none of this waste is going to be recycled is beginning to become a bit of a big concern. The public are noticing it as well, I think. I think something needs to change in this regard. The optics of this is not looking good. It certainly feels to me like we cannot carry on our model of doing this on the Downs, but I guess in wider parks as well. Can't really cope with the quantities we're facing at the moment. So I feel like somehow Bristol Parks and Bristol Waste Company need to sort of come together again to kind of look at what's happening at the moment, particularly in the bigger estates, the Downs, Blaze, places like that, to look again to just reevaluate the way we're doing waste management within parks at the moment. I would like an opportunity maybe to visit the waste transfer station, speak to some of the staff at Bristol Waste Company there to hear from them how they view the tons of waste that are coming in and what their opinion is on what they're doing with it at their end. But yeah, that's kind of ongoing. For now, grass cutting regime continues in earnest, as does football pitch renovation and seeding for the new season. Daily goat checks also continue. Our 4 new Bagot goats are fully integrated into life in the gully now since arrival in late March. Happily, they do seem to have lost some of the tameness that they came in with now. Their propensity to approach people boldly looking for some food was not ideal, to say the least, when they first came in. But from my point of view, they seem to have attained a bit more wildness now, which is good to see. That's welcome. Events-wise, Comedy Garden have come and gone. The event organizer of Comedy Garden was happy with how it went. The circus site was in good shape when they arrived to begin build, and the weather remained fine for the duration, so there's hardly any ground impact this time around to be concerned about, which is always pleasing. Breaking Bread, as members will know, are still with us on the much discussed water tower site. My team duck in and out periodically to carry out grass mowing. Due to the duration of their stay and the time of year that they'll be breaking down in, a significant amount of grounds reinstatement is inevitable and can be expected, but we'll come on to that in late September, I believe, which is when they will be beginning to break down. I've had meetings with organisers of both Race for Life and the Bristol University Student Union Welcome Fair to prepare for their events later this year. I've not yet heard from Adventure Cinema, so I will try and make contact with them to meet with the organisers of that. One negative point to report is likely we'll be losing 2 veteran ash trees from the main meadow area of the Downs. Recently reported to the tree officer that a large piece had broken from the canopy and was left hanging dangerously in one of the trees. The tree was inspected and found to be succumbing to ash dieback. The dangerous branch was removed, but the long-term outcome for the trees may possibly be, unfortunately, complete removal. This would be a shame, as ash trees at this veteran status are amazing for biodiversity and present welcome shade for the school groups out with Mandy Lever's environmental education sessions. However, the North Area Arboricultural Officer will make this call on the grounds of safety, so we'll wait and see on that. 3 more positive notes to end with. Members may be interested to hear that the Downs will be featuring an upcoming BBC Natural History Unit production, Green Planet. I did some filming with them in early June, scheduled to go out in January 2022. I've also engaged with the UK government Kickstart scheme and have a new member of staff for 6 months. The scheme is aimed at giving young people recently out of school but not getting into long-term employment an opportunity in work. Matthew started with us on June the 2nd and will work with us for 25 hours per week until December the 2nd. These 25 hours are funded by the Department of Work and Pensions. However, hopefully this will work out well for both parties. We definitely could do an extra pair of hands. Matthew can get a good amount of work experience on his CV for the future. Finally, to finish, my ongoing thanks as ever to FODAG, Friends of the Downs, Dead Hedge renovation and rebuild, extra daily goat checks around the time our new arrivals came in, repainting the white tree, weeding and maintenance at the Thomas Memorial plant beds, to name but a few things. They have contributed to Downs upkeep since the last report, so thank you to them. I have a few things that have come up since writing this report. I could talk about them in any other business, or I could mention them now. What would your preference be, Lord Mayor?
Sorry, I've muted myself. Go for it while you have the floor, then you carry on.
Okay, firstly, it was on the agenda for the last meeting. I haven't heard where we're at with it. Maybe a question, Oliver. The proposal to install a signboard, the Sir William Draper signboard on Christchurch Green on Clifton Down. I'm unclear as to whether permission was granted for that. I did make the offer to the proposer that we could install this signboard if required. I'm not sure where we're at in terms of permission granted to go ahead with that or not.
Yeah, I think I'll need to relook at it. I did receive the email, but I thought that was done and dusted and we had got approval, but I'll just need to dig out exactly how that happened so that we kind of cover ourselves. But I'm pretty sure we have approved it, but I'll double check and then send you an update after the meeting, Ben.
Okay, thank you, Oliver. Secondly, there are a number of places around the Downs where we periodically hear from local residents who see an issue with parking out, in their, where they kind of back onto the Downs, so outside their properties. This parking is kind of like an overspill from the designated parking areas. It could be students, sometimes it's van dwellers overspilling from Parry's Lane. Inevitably, some people would just be there looking to park there and hop on a bus to go to work into town. But recently, a resident off Savile Road has contacted the committee and would like to potentially pay to install some sort of grounds protection, be that large placement of large stones or wooden bollards. I'm unclear how the committee would like me to proceed with that sort of application stroke proposal. It does strike me as setting a bit of a precedent to allow a member of the public to contribute financially for something that they wanted to happen on the Downs, and it could leave the committee open to myriad proposals from people who live around the Downs who would like to financially contribute to have something done on the Downs. So before I engage with this person further, I'd like to hear kind of what the parameters are from the committee's point of view, please.
I'm muted again. Thank you, Ben. Okay, so a few things in there I think to pick up on, which I'll come to the floor with. First of all, just to say welcome, Matthew. Good to have you on board. Nice to know the team is expanding, which is great news. On that issue of funding, then, as Ben said, it's a request, and I should just to be completely clear, I was aware of this because it's someone living, I think actually not quite in my ward, but who contacted me as a member of the committee, and I passed it on to Ben, so I have some of the history of it. But what I don't want to get into today is a debate over the merits or otherwise of any particular scheme in any specific area to manage parking, but the principle of whether the Downs Committee should be able to accept private funding from individuals who wish to carry out schemes. And, you know, as Ben has said, that there is the risk of precedent there. However, in the past, we have accepted funding for things like benches and other bits and pieces like that. So a couple of hands going up. Councillor Clark, I think you were first.
Thank you very much indeed. I've got real reservations about this. I think we first of all need to check legally whether we can and are able to accept money from people. But the other thing that I'm slightly concerned about is if somebody's proposing maybe to put large stones on the Downs to prevent people parking at the rear of their property. That's one issue. I think there was some mention of putting more like hardcore maybe down on the grass, and I think that's also another issue that needs to be resolved. But I have concerns, and I do think we need to check it out legally before we take this any further. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor O'Rourke.
I was just going to ask a question about Ben. It's not to do about the financial contribution. I've had a phone call actually this morning from somebody, a resident who was terrified by a van driving across the grass, and I think this seems to be a bit of an issue. So she said she was with some 81-year-old man out just sort of last night, quietly walking their dogs at twilight. And a car came around, you know, a bush very quickly. This has become a bit of an issue. I don't know how do we deal with it? Is it a trend? Do we need to stop it?
I would strongly suggest that would be related to. Apologies, I haven't mentioned it in this report. We do have our neighbours outside the depot again. We do have a traveller encampment. Maybe been here for like 6-7 days now. Our usual process is in play of removal, but yeah, I would strongly suspect that what you're talking about there, Paula, is related to those guys moving their vehicles on and off where they're situated. Really, yeah, makes me annoyed. I have reported it to 101 that we've got vehicle movements. You know, that the vehicle movements are what trouble me most of all. The way that they insist on bringing their vehicles on and off, you know, the road onto where their caravans are situated, and it's pretty unregulated, and at times has to be dangerous given how busy we are at times. And yeah, the process for removal is in play. I hope more than anyone that that eviction can take place as soon as possible, and yeah, we will begin the inevitable clear up, which is also another associated problem.
Thank you. Councillor Gollop, was your hand up? I'm sorry, Gillian, I'll come to you as well in a moment.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. A number of points. The first one on that, and Steve, you know the problem that our residents express as well, which is the sheer concern if local residents were to park a car on the Downs, they would almost certainly receive a ticket. And it is a serious concern that residents and Ben and his team are at risk to this, and whether we as a committee can request that proper enforcement processes are in place, because the driving of vehicles on the Downs is extraordinarily dangerous. I link that into the issue that we know residents have wanted to contribute to putting stones on the road to stop illegal encampments in parts of the Downs. So I would just urge that whatever answer we give to one resident, we have to bear in mind that there are lots of other residents with views, and we do need to be extremely careful on how we respond to any request from residents. I am a great believer that we should be crowdfunding for the Downs, but that should be contributing to funding proposals. I would worry if we start taking contributions from individual residents for their own specific recommendations in their locality. So concerns there, but if I might go on to the other point I was wanting to know more about, which is Ben's comments about waste. I can't help being an accountant. I thought I'd go to the income and expenditure report and see what it's costing us. And there is no breakdown of information. So I don't know how much extra it's costing us. But I'm wondering, Steve, whether you on behalf of the committee could write to Tony Lawless, is the MD of Bristol Waste, saying that as a committee, we view this with very great concern and ask for some urgent consideration of how we can recycle that waste. I'm aghast. I naively assumed it was somehow sorted and recycled. The thought that it's not is really is very disturbing, and I think you ought to copy that into possibly the strategic director responsible as well, because there may be some overall budget implications here. But I think if you could stress the concern, I hope everyone else feels my shock at this, that we'd like to have some discussions on how it can be done. From Bristol Waste point of view, it should present an advertising and marketing profile for them. So therefore, hopefully they could see the benefits in partaking of it. But I think if you were to write on our behalf, it should provoke a response, or at least a meeting with Ben and a senior member of Bristol Waste team.
Yeah, very, very happy to do that. I'm not seeing anyone aghast in horror at that suggestion, so I'll certainly do that. Thank you, Jeff. Gillian.
So I just have a couple of comments. I am concerned that we need to have a coherent and consistent policy around individuals funding things, and I am very, very wary about just supporting individuals to fund their own particular scheme, however irritating it may be to them to have this. We need to find a different way through. I just think that we may all feel in tune with one scheme and then not in tune with something else, and I think to start cherry picking individual people funding their own part of works on the Downs is a really, really dangerous precedent to set, and I absolutely would not recommend it. I feel sad. I had a long, we had a long discussion with Ben about the waste on the Downs, and I mean the Downs is an absolutely iconic space that needs to be loved and cherished and protected by us all, and I just at a loss to understand why people aren't taking their rubbish home with them. It would then be put into their domestic recycling, and I understand about writing to Bristol Waste about the recycling, but do people want to see enormous hoppers across the Downs for people to put their rubbish in, or thousands of waste paper bins across the Downs? I think we need to get into a mindset where this beautiful piece of countryside belongs to everybody, and we need to look after it. And I just feel quite depressed about people not taking their rubbish home with them. If they've brought it there, they should take it back.
Thank you, Gillian. Yeah, I entirely agree with you. Carla, Councillor Denny, I should say, sorry.
Oh, no, it's Carla's fine. I am interested in Jeff's suggestion that rather than accepting money from residents for specific projects near their homes, which I agree is not a wise idea, that we look into a crowdfunding scheme where contributions can be pooled and then decisions made on how to spend them more sensibly. I don't know, apologies if this has already been looked into before my time, but that sounds like something that if we are allowed to crowdfund, I'm sure that there are lots of residents who would be keen to contribute to it to improve facilities. It could be even branded as some kind of like Bristol Downs bond or something, perhaps. Regarding waste and recycling on the Downs, I have previously made inquiries about why there are no recycling bins. I'm not surprised that the waste collected on the Downs isn't recycled, because there are no recycling bins. So it would be dangerous and unsafe for Bristol waste workers to have to sift through general waste to lift out recycling. And even if they did do that, I know from briefings I've had when I used to be on the relevant scrutiny committee that the quality of recycling, if it's had to be hand picked out of landfill waste, because it's so contaminated, the council can get a very low rate for it, selling the recyclate on the market. So it's not really worth their time to do that. So if we want the waste on the Downs that's collected there to be recycled, then I'm almost completely confident that Tony Lawless will come back and say, well, then it needs to be separated by users. But yeah, I have asked for separate recycling bins a few times, asked the council to look into that, and haven't had any progress. So if that's something that the Downs committee is willing to sort of ask as a committee, I think that could really help. And while I agree that it would be great for people to take their own things home, I do think we need to accept that the number of people using the Downs has dramatically increased, and the number of bins currently on the Downs just is vastly out of proportion to that. So we're not going to be able to persuade overnight behaviour change of every resident in Bristol. We do just need more places for them to put their rubbish and recycling, I think.
Thank you. And Councillor O'Rourke.
You can call me Paula too. So I think Bristol Waste have done a really good job all the way through the pandemic, you know, and they've sort of met a good compromise of putting out some extra bins that are not, you know, not hugely dominant. But, you know, I've been doing litter picking, and I'm sorry to be virtue signaling here, but, you know, I was out this morning, and around nearly every bench anywhere on the Downs that you come to, you'll find a bottle, a can, some sort of container that some food was in, maybe an empty packet of fags. And it's like as if people just feel that they can get up from the bench and walk home. So we do really need to, I think we need some sort of a campaign of messaging that it's not okay that, you know, if you bring something, you take it away with you. And I just think, you know, and again, in the same way that before we had the extra bins, people would just feel that it was adequate to pile all the stuff on the road around the bins. So we've mitigated that by putting out extra bins. But now I think what we need to do is to have, especially around the benches and things, that maybe, I know we don't like a huge amount of signs all over the Downs, but maybe you do need to have something on those spaces and the lookouts where people particularly go to say, you have to take it home.
Yeah. Thank you. Peter, I know your hand up. I think Ben wants to come in and respond to that. Ben.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We have recently put up around 20 recently produced signs, specifically, you know, making the point of please take your litter, please take the things that you've brought here away with you. They've just gone up in the last week in a few strategic places where people kind of come onto the Downs. I felt that just putting them at the bins would be too late, because by that time people have walked across the bins expecting to leave it there. These messages need to be seen as they walk onto the Downs before they consume what they're about to consume. So that's happened, beginning to use extra signage to push this message. Going back to Councillor Denya's point about more bins, I'm not sure how many bins would be enough to deal with what we're looking at. And what Paul has just said about the extra bins, yeah, extra bins from us, extra bins from Bristol Waste Company. Absolutely, they're all out there, and it's still not enough. And you're still getting the mountains of rubbish left around 7 or 8 oil drum bins in a row that are full with the mountain of rubbish. And that will be a water tower site, circus site. That will be at the observatory in Clifton. That will be down at the sea walls. You know, I've got 2 members of staff in every weekend, every Saturday and Sunday morning, just fighting to get the Downs in a reasonable state again. For, you know, it's just, the quantities are just vast. The quantities are just going through the roof. Yeah, I just want to, you know, spark this conversation. Really, I'm not sure how many bins would be enough to cope with this. going back to my point, maybe we just divert to the two ends of the spectrum, or either take away all the bins and see what happens, see if that drives behavioural change because of that stark, wow, there's actually no bins here, what am I going to do now? Or the other end of the spectrum, as Gillian Cam mentioned, accept, and Carla, accept that people will want to sort what they've got, and so build kind of bays, glass, plastic, metal, that people can do that sorting at site. But that's going to be an unsightly thing that's going to require a roadway leading up to it to load from, to take away from. Is that really what we want?
Just to be clear, Ben, I was absolutely not in favour of that idea.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's an appalling idea.
Yeah, but it represents the other end of the spectrum, doesn't it? The other end of the extreme. We're operating in the middle somewhere, where we have a few permanent bins, and then we add to them as we come into the summer. We add and we add and we add. We are maximised with extra bins at the moment. I'm not sure how many bins would be enough bins right now.
Okay, thank you, Ben. I'll go to Peter and then John.
I was going to make similar points to Ben. I do not think you can out-bin this behaviour no matter how hard you try, and it'll just be a bigger and bigger problem. I think there was a time when we didn't have any bins on the downs, and the problem was a lot less. People just looked around and then took their rubbish home with them. Pretty much the same thing happens in a number of the other parks. Ashton Park, for example, lots of people are out picnicking, but there aren't any bins and they don't seem to leave heaps of rubbish around. So I think any bin is an invitation to abuse that bin. And I think we should look around and see how the problem is better managed elsewhere. And to the funding point, which we were discussing, I think if we're having a strategic review, I think it should include what funding streams might be available, because some funding streams will preclude other ones. And I think that might be the place to examine the strategic consequences of different routes forward for funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. John.
Thank you. In regards to actually the waste, I think we just need to try and get things into context, because, we've just gone through a period over the last 12, 18 months where, the public have actually been utilising the actual public and green spaces a lot more. We're estimating 40% actually increase in footfall across all the public parks and green spaces in Bristol. And, areas like Castle Park in the middle of the city, we've experienced similar issues to actually sort of to the actual sort of down. So I think we just need to have a bit of time of reflection once we get out of the lockdown to see exactly, does that naturally improve? If it doesn't, then let's do a review exactly sort of how we can actually better manage the waste, how we can actually better encourage the actual public to actually sort of take their waste home. I think just sort of jumping to sort of saying additional bins or no bins, I think we just need to just have a time of reflection once we're, hopefully past the 19th of July, and actually sort of see that actually, has the actual waste management improved or not. I think we appreciate that actually litter has increased quite significantly. In terms of actually sort of utilising of the actual sort of the downs for people's private usage, I totally agree with Gillian. That needs a policy to actually make sure that we're consistent in approach. And if the actual committee was ever sort of mindful of such things, then that would have to be a licensed activity, or I recommend it would be a licensed activity. Should actually we used to revoke that license, then we could actually get the area reinstated to actually the original sort of condition.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands up, so I will try my best to summarise that discussion and get some actions out of it. And please do feel free to jump up and down or butt in if you think I'm getting this wrong. So as far as the question about private funding goes, I think the temperature of the room is very much that we don't think that's it. Certainly simply allow individuals to pick a project and pay for it is not where we want to be. However, there is an opportunity to look at crowdfunding in some form as a source of funding, which could then be used to do projects which we as a committee, or which Ben and his team want to do, and that's something that we can look at as part of the review that we've just kicked off. So that's that one. On the issue of waste, I think I've taken an action already to contact Tony Lawless, at the very least ask for Bristol Waste to talk to Ben and see how, what other cooperation we could do in the short term to deal with the issue. I think what John said is right, that we're in an unusual period. It may change, it may not, we don't know at the moment. My own view, for what it's worth, is that it actually links in a little bit with the issue of driving, or particularly parking on the grass. I think the encampment that's there at the moment is a slightly separate issue, but it's not uncommon to see cars parked on the grass where someone's just driven onto the grass so they can park next to their barbecue, which they shouldn't be having anyway. And I think part of that is people don't know what the Downs bylaws say. You would hope people didn't need to be told not to drop litter, but maybe they don't know that they're not supposed to drive on the grass, or they're not supposed to have barbecues. And I think that we could be a lot better than we are at engaging positively with people and sharing those messages. I think we could also be better than we are for the small minority who don't want to be positively engaged with at enforcing the bylaws that already exist. And that, that's partly around litter and driving, parking and other things. So I have asked legal colleagues in the council, and I know John's on that same email chain, just to advise what powers do exist, if any, for us to be able to do that as well. And that's a conversation that we'll aim to carry on. And in terms of actions, I have contact Bristol Waste and rolling the question of crowdfunding into the wider strategic review in terms of funding sources. Does anybody want to jump in and add anything? John, your little blue hand is still up. Did you want to add anything, or was that from? Okay, brilliant. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone jumping up and down, so I'm going to take that as agreement. Thank you very much, and thank you, Ben, for your report. Some really important issues in there. Item 9 on the agenda is a report back from the Wildlife Project Education Programme. So we've had a report published and circulated with the minutes. Do we have, sorry, I should have checked this in advance. Hi, hello. You're going to come and report back to us verbally, please. The floor is yours.
So thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, committee. Nice to see so many new members. Because I have been on furlough, I was on furlough for a year. I haven't met lots of you. So I thought I'd just, I'm Mandy Levers. I thought I'd just give you a little bit of background to the project so that you kind of like understand how we fit in with what happens on the Downs. The Avon Gorge and Downs Wildlife Project, I'm the education manager for the Avon Gorge and Downs Wildlife Project. The project itself was launched in 1999, and we're a partnership of Bristol City Council, Bristol Zoological Society, the Merchant Venturers, Downs Committee, Natural England, the University of Bristol, and we also work with the National Trust and Forestry England on the other side of the gorge. Since 2001, I've been running the education programme on the Downs. The project itself, the partners have basically 3 roles. The first is surveying and monitoring the wildlife in the Avon Gorge and on the Downs. The second half is all about habitat management. And then the third part is education and community engagement. So that's the bit that I've been running since 2001. So in normal times, it's myself and a seasonal education officer and a team of fantastic volunteers. Since 2001, over nearly 130,000 people have taken part in one of the educational activities on the Downs. So the sort of things that we run, we normally have a programme of public programme of walks, talks, courses, children's events and family events, which look at all aspects of the wildlife of the Gorge and Downs. And it's all about encouraging a wide range of people to come and enjoy, learn about and appreciate our special wildlife. I also work with school groups, so we normally have school groups visiting from Easter through to the end of October. During the summer holidays, we work with play schemes, and we also have special projects working with community groups as part of the Your Downs initiative, which is a partnership between the education programme, Ben, the Friends of the Downs and Avon Gorge, and Walking for Health. I also produce the interpretation that you see on the Downs, so the nature interpretation panels, as well as a wide range of nature trail leaflets, so people can come and explore the Gorge and Downs at their own pace. So Downs Committee actually fund half of my post. The other half of it is funded by Bristol Zoological Society. And you also fund the Learning and Engagement Officer, which is a 6-month post. As I said, I was on furlough for a year. I had a few false starts where I came back a couple of times, and then we went into lockdown, so I was put on furlough again. But I returned properly after Easter, and I've been really busy getting the education programme back up and running again. It's been quite tricky with all the COVID considerations and new systems of working and doing new risk assessments. But in April, we started to recruit for this year's Education, Learning and Engagement Officer, and Vanessa Adnet was appointed and began at the end of May. And it's been a really sort of like intense period of training her up, getting her to know the site before, she basically had 3 weeks before we welcomed back our school groups. We've also had to rebuild our volunteer team, and we've had amazing support from our volunteers, and we've now got a really good, healthy group of people who are really keen to help with the educational activities on the Downs. We started teaching the school groups from mid-June, and we've only been able to run 18 sessions. We'll be running from mid-June to next week. But that's nearly 500 children that we will be welcoming back to the Downs this summer. This is obviously a lot less than we normally teach in a summer, but we've been having to sort of start back slowly with all the COVID precautions, making sure we've got plenty of time to sterilise and disinfect the activity equipment between each group coming. We've also, I've been sending out programmes and talking to schools about the autumn term, and the autumn term booking is going really well. Schools are absolutely desperate to get back out learning about wildlife and getting children reconnected with nature. So, the schools that we talk to, the feedback has been fantastic. They absolutely love coming to the Downs. They really appreciate being able to learn about our special wildlife, whether it's our hairy conservationists, the goats, or the peregrine falcons, or doing a wildflower treasure hunt, or learning about different habitats we have on the Downs. So the feedback from the teachers has been tremendous, but also the adult helpers, the parents have been coming. We had a goat session last week, and the parents were just, at the end of it, were so enthusiastic, saying they had no idea how important the Gorge and Downs were for wildlife. That they come here regularly, but they had no idea, kind of like they now know where to look, and they just really wanted to feed back how special they think the Gorge and Downs is and how important it is. We had a brownie group came and visit on Friday night, and they absolutely love being on the Downs as well. And we're starting to get play scheme bookings for the summer holidays, but sadly, due to lockdown, quite a few of the play schemes we regularly work with have actually folded, so they won't be able to join us this year. I have obviously all the events for 2020 had to be cancelled. There are a couple that we were able to postpone. But I'm starting to plan now for the autumn, and hopefully we'll have some nice events for the public to come and enjoy in the autumn. We've also started working on a Your Downs project, which is called Nature in the Streets, and it's all about working with young people 18 to 24 who have mental health issues. And it's all about connecting with nature and art, and it's all about the healing benefits and improvements and well-being of being in green spaces. This is a project that we're running with Off the Records, which work with young people as well as the Friends of the Downs and Avon Gorge. And we've got funding from the co-op to actually carry out this project, with some top-up funding from the commoners of Durdham Down and the Durdham Downs charity. Originally, the idea was that the young people were going to come on a series of visits to sort of get to know the Gorge and Downs, and then it would culminate in a collective piece of artwork, a mural, which we were hoping to do at Upfest, the Festival of Street Art, but there's so much uncertainty about whether this is going to go ahead that actually we've been talking to the Friends of the Rainbow Bridge, which is in Montpellier, and Network Rail, and there's a bridge there that they would love to have a mural on, and we feel this is a much more sort of permanent mural that we could create. And also it helps us with the idea of connecting people from other parts of Bristol and saying the Downs is yours, it's for everybody, and because it's on a train line, it's also a sustainable way that people can actually come and visit the Downs. So we feel it all fits in very nicely, and it will sort of help young people particularly to understand how they can get from Montpellier, St Paul's, and come up to the Downs, and that it is for them. We've also been talking with this is Waste and Strays project. I was going to ask Paula. So Paula and Ben were originally involved in the Waste and Strays project, and I don't know, have you reported back to Downs Committee about this project, Paula?
No, not officially. I mean, it's something that we should probably get on an agenda. It seems to be still ongoing. They're in the second phase. We, 2 years ago, we had sort of phase one and did a few things, and now they're sort of working up again. We've had some meetings, and I could do a sort of informal feedback. Unfortunately, somebody's just decided to arrive at my door now, and there's a bit of noise in the background. Always happens. So yes, if you liked, I could do some sort of a report for the next meeting if that would be useful. Could collate a few ideas and.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that would be really helpful to have that policy.
Okay, absolutely.
Thanks.
So there are actually 4 commons that are being looked at as part of this Waste and Strays project. So Paula will obviously do a bit more about it next time. But there's sort of 3 elements to the project. The first is that so the Downs was chosen as one of the commons that was going to be studied. One element to it is that there's a researcher who's collecting oral histories about what the Downs, how important it is to people and their memories. And then we've also, the second part is we've got a poet in residence. So John Clark from Exeter University, and he's going to be running a series of poetry related activities to celebrate the special Gorge and Downs, and creating writings which will be exhibited at the end of the project. And as part of that, he came and worked with one of the schools as one of our education sessions. So while the meadows were absolutely spectacular a couple of weeks ago, he ran creative writing workshop with 2 classes. We're also planning some historical poetry walks with Francis Greenacre, one of the merchant venturers who was on Downs Committee and is the history buff for the Downs. And John's also going to be running a poetry workshop with the Friends of the Downs and Avon Gorge as well in the autumn. Recently, I didn't put it in my report because it was only last week, there was a 3rd member of the Waste and Strays team who's contacted me, and that's Siobhan O'Neill. She's at Portsmouth University, and she's doing a creative mapping project on the Downs, and she's inviting people who live around or work on or visit the Gorge and Downs, to take part in this creative mapping project. And she's giving people tasks to go and explore the Downs and write down what they think is special about the site, and areas that people think could be up for improvement. And at the end of the project, they are going to be creating field guides and an exhibition. So members of the committee may be interested in taking part in some of those activities. So finally, the publicity, Ben mentioned the Bagot goats. They've been hugely popular. The children that came to see them last week were loving the new little Bagot goats, as well as our older cashmere goats. We produced a press release which went out to explain that the goats had arrived and what their conservation job was. and it was picked up really well by ITV, and we got onto the ITV Tea Time News, and our posts on Facebook have been exceedingly popular. Everyone loves our new little goats. There is just one final thing that I didn't manage to put in the report, but you may have noticed, because I've not been here and been able to sort of monitor what's going on. But our interpretation panels around the Downs are starting to look really shabby, and quite a few of them have actually, especially at sea walls and at the top of White Ladies Road, have been vandalised. Bits of them have been snapped off, and they are starting to delaminate. So it is something that we need to look at in terms of replacement, because they don't look great at the moment. So that's one of those things where I need to get some funding for that. So any top ideas would be amazing. And if there's a crowd funding opportunity to feed into that, that would be amazing. So yeah, thank you very much. There's lots of things, you know, we are slowly starting back. I think we've achieved quite a lot already, but we are sort of back in business, and you know, sort of like starting to welcome groups back again. So thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mandy. That's really, really comprehensive, and nice to hear lots of really good, positive stuff happening, which is great. Anybody, any questions, comments, etc.? Gillian, you're muted, Gillian.
Thank you very much. That piece of the meetings just made me feel like it's all worthwhile, frankly. Made me feel like clearing. I just think there's some important points to draw out of that. First of all, how important various community groups and volunteer groups are to the operation of the Downs, and we should thank FODAG and others for the contribution they make. It's really important. I think the other thing is, those of you who know, Merchant Venturers run 9 schools, and we may all feel we've been hit by COVID, but what's been happening in our schools has been pretty nigh on devastating. And I think to have something like Coming to the Downs is just unbelievably important and unbelievably helpful. You know, young people are having a really tough time. So it's great to hear what Mandy's doing there. And I think the other point, you know, when we look at our strategy, is the Downs is for everybody. And I applaud your work, Mandy, in terms of, you know, some of the groups that wouldn't normally necessarily come to the Downs. I think that's incredibly important. And then finally, just I was interested about the Wastes and Strays piece, because Livy D interviewed me. I wasn't aware she was interviewing anybody else, but I think what's really interesting is she's doing a comparative study on 4 urban open spaces, and they're all configured slightly differently in terms of ownership and funding and things like that. And I think it would be useful to see what we can learn from that. So I think there's lots of strands that are kind of coming together for me, and I just thought it was a great report, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gillian. Simon.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just one thought leading on from what Gillian's just said, actually, that the groups which Mandy encourages to come to the Downs, who we wouldn't normally expect to come to the Downs, we should make sure that we include those as stakeholders when we do the governance review, because it's quite easy to chart those things out geographically, but of course there are people coming from quite a distance across the city to enjoy the Downs. We must make sure we include those, and I'm sure Mandy's contact list will give us some good clues.
Excellent point. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, I'm not seeing any other.
Can I just very quickly just say a huge thank you to Ben as well, because when I did come back, all the sort of areas that I would normally teach in, we have like a bit of an outdoor classroom on Zoo Banks. They're all in quite a mess, and Ben and his team and Community Payback were just fantastic at helping us very quickly get those areas back into shape for when our school groups arrived. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now just before we quickly move on, I realise I've missed something, so I need to very quickly duck back and cover the minutes of the previous meeting, which I somehow managed to skip over. That was on the 22nd of March. The minutes have been published on the website and circulated to all members. We are aware at the moment that the numbering on the minutes has every item listed as item 1. That, I'm afraid, is a bug in the software called modern.gov, which generates these things, and it is being worked on, but it's not something that Oliver can do anything about today. Aside from that, does anyone have any concerns over the accuracy of those minutes? Paula?
It's not a concern, and it's a very small thing, and I'm really just bragging about the fact that I've noticed it, is that the Comedy Garden is said to have happened in July, and it was earlier because I went and it was great, but I know it was earlier, so that's probably just a typo.
Thank you. Bearing that one alteration in mind, are we happy that those minutes were an accurate record of our last meeting? Just by nodding of heads. Anybody disagree? I'm seeing no hands, so those minutes are accepted. Thank you very much. Right, item 10 is the events report. Now this report has been published. It's in the papers and has been distributed to all members. It was also discussed in more detail at the events and finance subgroup, so it's presented here for information really. But if anyone, well, Stefan first of all is with us. Stefan, is there anything in that report that particularly needs to be highlighted in today's meeting, or is it simply there for information?
No, not really. Yeah, just to say that Breaking Bread and Comedy Garden have all both well gone ahead for the Comedy Garden, are going ahead for Breaking Bread, all going really well. And then we have the 6 events listed in there that are coming up. The first 3 of those are well through the site's permissions process. The other 3 are a little behind, but that's just to be expected as they're later in the season. But no, nothing really to highlight other than what's in the report.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Ben, I think was your hand up there.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Stefan, is it possible for you to put me in contact with Adventure Cinema, please? I'd like to have a chance to chat with them and hear what their plans are. I mean, I know what their plans are, but just hear a bit more detail.
Yeah, no problem. I can sort that for you.
Thank you. Anybody else with any comments, questions, etc. on the event report? I'm not seeing any hands. Thank you very much. Item 11, similarly, the finance update. Again, this has been published and distributed, and again was covered in more detail at the events and finance group as well. Kevin is here with us. Kevin, anything you wanted to pull out specifically for this meeting on there?
Not specifically, no. I mean, I've explained on the, in the report that there was some significant deficits. We all know why. The pandemic had a negative impact on the events and hospitality sector, and prior year underspends have covered the 2021 costs. And then looking forward, we're still projecting a deficit due to the sort of legal fees and ongoing COVID costs that we've talked about, additional cleaning and maintenance, those types of things. So we have some reserves, but not enough to cover it all. So this is something that we will need to address during the year on how we're going to balance the books.
Yeah, and I think it is worth noting that by the end of this year, for the first time in several years, the City Council will be underwriting the operation of the Downs to cover those deficits. And clearly that's the position that through the review that we're going to carry out, we need to address and correct.
Indeed, yeah.
Does anybody else? Jeff?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. A question I had that I suspect Kevin may not be able to answer now, but the City Council receives significant funding from central government to compensate for costs relating to the coronavirus. I know that wasn't compensation for lost income, but it was compensation for expenditure pressures. Did the Downs Committee budget get any credit in respect of the additional costs that were incurred?
I think as part of the parks submission, I understand there are some costs associated with additional cleaning and litter costs. So they should be in the return. There was something in there.
Right. I'd just like to be assured that we've been credited with that as part of arriving at deficit and that it hadn't gone elsewhere.
Yeah, that's the bit that we need to address is how we manoeuvre it through to the Downs.
could we have that quantified, and could we also have confirmation that if part of Mandy's salary comes out of our budget and Mandy was furloughed, that we've also had the benefit of the credit of that furlough?
Yeah, we can look at these. We can look at these details. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. That's one for the action tracker there, just to clarify those details. Thank you very much. Sorry, I thought I saw another hand, but I can't see anyone on the screen at the moment. No. Okay, thank you. In that case, thank you very much, Kevin, for that report. We move on to any other business. Now, I have one item, but I'll go around the room first. Does anybody else have any other business to raise in today's meeting? Lots of shaking heads. Okay, right, so I will just raise the one item. I have been approached by the Mayor's office. Now, this is a little bit circular, and I'll try and explain this as clearly as I can. Respect the Downs are a campaign group concerned about the issues of vehicle encampments. They asked the Mayor's office what plans it had to deal with the issues of vehicle encampments, and this was towards the end of last year. The Mayor's office came back and suggested a couple of options, one of which, some of which we've discussed in Downs Committee meetings before. One was reviewing parking restrictions to make them easier to enforce, and one was the potential of closing the section of Parry's Lane that cuts off the corner of the White Tree roundabout where the majority of those vehicles currently are. Respect the Downs, as a campaign group, polled their members, found that there was support for both of those options, and went back to the Mayor's office saying, yes, we support these options. Now, I am their local, or one of their local councillors, as is Jeff, and with my hat on as their local councillor, I supported them in putting that proposal, or in communicating with the Mayor's office on that proposal. The Mayor's office has now come to me, wearing my hat as chair of this committee, and said, if we were to close that section of Parry's Lane and in some form rewild it and hand it back to become part of the Downs as new green space, would the Downs Committee be willing to take it on and take responsibility for it? Now, my response so far is obviously I will bring it to this meeting to ask. However, we need to be very clear that the decision to close a road or not is not one for this committee. That's a decision for the City Council as Highways Authority. And that before we could make any definitive answer on what we are or aren't prepared to do as the Downs Committee, we would need to see a detailed plan and the costings of who, exactly what it is that's proposed, who's paying for what. However, at this stage, the Mayor's office fully understand all of that. They're not at that stage yet, but what they're asking for is an in principle statement that if they were to close that section of road, subject to seeing a detailed plan and costings and subject to proper public consultation, would the Downs Committee be willing in principle to accept a new bit of green coming back into the Downs and ceasing to be a road? So that's the question before us. Councillor Clark, your hand's up.
Thank you. My query is, with a lot of these issues, it's a little bit like squeezing a balloon. If we look at closing a section of road, does that mean that that community will just move further down the road, or move on to another road, or move elsewhere on the Downs? And that is something that I think we need to look at, because the implications of that action will have consequences potentially in other areas of the Downs. So I think we need to look at that really carefully. The implications of taking on another piece of land and the management of it, I think, is a separate issue. And in principle, I've got no problems with that. But I think that we do need to seriously look at what are the implications of that action. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I can entirely understand, and yes, I'm sure what you say is absolutely right. I just want to be clear at the moment that the decision to close or not close the road or to change parking restrictions, while this committee would be a consultee in that decision, it's that is for that those wider policy decisions aren't for this committee specifically to make. Although of course, certainly those of us who are elected councillors will all have our views on that. Paula.
Hi, and so obviously all the arguments for doing this are really sound and very hard to oppose. until you begin to consider the counter arguments. And the counter arguments is what makes it so complex. First of all, I thought Joss was going to make my point, but actually I was thinking about the wider city. You know, we can close this road, but then, you know, there are other parts of the city where there are huge problems with people who are living in vans. And it's sort of, I think, you know, we should not see this in isolation. We should see it as a city issue. And also, you know, we've got the difficulty of we've had people from the van communities who've come and presented to our committee in the past. And, you know, you could not but be sympathetic for those people. You know, I can remember a really lovely young woman who was here working in the NHS and supporting her parents, and she couldn't afford anywhere to live. So, and when you and I talked about coming up with this draft proposal, we did say that, you know, we really need to have to highlight in this that as part of solving this problem, we have to come up with some solutions, which is, where do these people go? So, of course, if you pitch me the idea of taking away the road and taking away the van problem and having more green space there, yes, but only if the other side of that coin is some sort of a solution that doesn't push our problem across the city where there are already problems, and if we just penalise and punish people who are living somewhere where they don't really have any other choices. So I'm sorry, you know, I'm just making your problem worse. Yeah. But no, I think I would only be under those, I would only support it on the caveats, those two caveats. And I see Carla nodding her head. But.
Yeah, that's fine. I completely understand that, Paula. And though clearly this is what we're being asked to consider today is one little bit of what is clearly a much bigger citywide issue. And I think we've all, again, certainly those of us who are councillors have all been involved in different conversations about that bigger citywide issue. I just want to be clear about what is our remit as the Downs Committee and what is that bigger citywide issue. Not that we can ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist, but I just want to the question we're being asked today as the Downs Committee is simply, in principle, if the council as Highways Authority wanted to hand us a bit of land, subject to the finances being right, would we be willing to accept?
Well, can I just ask a further question then? So have you been able to go back to the Mayor's office and ask if there can be an alternative site provided for the people who are living there? Because I think, you know, you and I have discussed this before and decided that would be an ideal solution.
Yes, I have, and so that was in the position paper that you and I worked on from this to the Mayor's office. They've had that. I have had those conversations actually. I met with the team from the Mayor's office last week when they came to me with this request, and I did have that conversation with them as well. So yes, I have had those conversations, and I'm sure many of us will have done in different ways. I don't want to minimise that or take those issues away. I'm just trying to say that's not, you know, the question they've asked us today is, would you take this piece of land if it was no longer a road? And I think we just need to focus on what is for us as the Downs Committee and what is for each of us individually as elected councillors as a bigger city issue.
But if you segregate them, then I wouldn't support it.
Okay. David.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm assuming that the road or the land on which the road is built was part of the Downs prior to being designated as a road. So to me, it's probably logical that we take it back anyway. But it might be worth just checking that, but I would anticipate that the answer is yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to say, Lord Mayor, the actual highways will only own the surface out of the actual highways, so they don't actually own the land beneath. So it's only the actual sort of surface of the actual road they will own. And it may be worthwhile just checking in terms of actually, if you de-designate it as up the highway, what impacts and implications it may have, if that's the decision that actually is going to be made.
Yeah.
Legally, what will happen is that it will come back. It will become part of the Downs again and be owned by City Council, because that's part of the City Council, part of the Downs.
Yeah.
So automatic. Sorry, Councillor. It would be automatic. I think that it would become part of the. It would go back into the ownership of the council and therefore part of the Downs.
Yeah, and I know from the conversation I've had this week that the mayor's office team who are looking at this are also speaking to Highways and to Legal and to all of the other stakeholders that will be part of this. So I think the sense that I'm getting is that in terms of accepting that piece of land, subject to Paula's point about the taking account of the wider issues that go around this as well, that subject to seeing a detailed funded plan, there's no particular objection here to that piece of land, should it ever happen, becoming part of the Downs again. I'm seeing nodding heads. Okay, thank you. I will feed that back to the Mayor's office with your, I suspect they're probably watching this on YouTube anyway, but just in case they're not, I will feed that back and make sure they're clear about the points you've raised, Paula, as well.
Sure that how clear I'm making the point, because I feel very strongly about it. That, you know, if you segregate one from the other, I don't agree with it. So I'm not nodding my head and saying that we give up the piece of land. Only, on the proviso that an alternative site is found for people, because I just think we can't push this problem away to the rest of the city.
Yeah.
Or penalise those people.
Understood. Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of the meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled to be held on the 20th of September. And once again, at risk of being hostage to fortune, that is scheduled to be a face-to-face meeting, which I will very much look forward to. So thank you very much, everybody, for today. And we'll see you on the 20th of September. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.